Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from Rotowire here with the Week 9 must start fantasy football players. But look, you would be upset if I didn't go over some of these trade ramifications now, wouldn't you? So we're going to talk some trades and we'll get into that pretty quickly. So, first of all, Chase Edmonds to the Dolphins. So here's what we need to figure out. What happened this year with Chase Edmonds? Chase Edmonds had been 5.1 yards per carry, 4.6, 5.1 in the last few years. Very good running back. He had 53 catches in 16 games back in 2020, 43 catches in 12 games last year, and he was completely useless this year with the Dolphins. 2.9 yards per carry. And I wondered to myself, well, Mike McDaniels obviously knows that Raheem Mostert can't hold up to a heavy workload. And so it's like, what's going on here? Right. But he's playing Mostert heavy snaps. I don't think he felt he had another option. So what it tells me is Chase Edmonds doesn't stink. He was a poor system fit for the San Francisco 49ers, which is now in Miami, rushing scheme. That's what it tells me. You don't go from being a very efficient back to being a poor one. So Edmonds goes to the Broncos. And if I said Dolphins earlier, I'm sorry. He goes to the Broncos. Now, in Denver, been saying for weeks, my opinion. Other people disagree, okay? To me, Melvin Gordon looks like he's far on the back nine. And he's getting 3 yards a carry. And the run blocking has been good in Denver. They've had sporadic offensive line injuries, missing a player here or there. The line has been a good blocking line. Latavius Murray's washed out of the league twice, and everybody's getting excited about Latavius Murray. Denver has a chance to bring in Edmonds. They have a bye week this week. It would not surprise me if Edmonds came in immediately and saw 40% of the work. Do I know that for a fact? No. Can Gordon still be the guy? They benched him 2 weeks ago. Maybe. I know they don't want to commit to Latavius Murray. If anybody wanted Murray so badly, they could have had him for free in the offseason. Nobody wanted him. He's in the practice squad of the Saints. Could have poached him off there at any time, right? And eventually Denver did when they were desperate. So look, Chase Edmonds, I can't tell you that he's going to be Superman. He never has been Superman, but he's been a good running back. My opinion is he comes in, he's the back we saw the last 3 years. He's an above average back, not a super high above average back, but a good running back. I think, especially in 12-team competitive leagues, he should be rostered. If he was dropped, he should be rostered. Now, in the super deep leagues I'm in, I had to hold him in the roster shares I have them because there's nothing on the waiver wire. I wanted to wait for the trade deadline. Something happened. Maybe it works out. So I do think he's worth a speculative ad for sure. With the bye week this week, he should come in and we'll see kind of quickly what his perceived role might be. All right, the next one, Nyheim Hines to the Bills. So this goes back to March. Free agency begins, and the Bills agreed to a deal with J.D. McKissic. They wanted a receiving back badly. The deal falls through at the last minute. In the draft, they signed James Cook, and he is going to be a really good player. But he's obviously worked his way into things so far. And he did well last week. You saw a little bit of an increased snap share, maybe 28, 30% off the top of my head. I can't quite remember. It's close to that. But the fact they bring in Nyheim Hines, what it tells me is this. James Cook's going to be a very good player, but not yet. I don't think they believe he's ready for what they need him to do. They wanted a back that was an accomplished receiver, which points out to McKissic. Now, McKissic's not explosive, but Nyheim Hines is excessively more explosive than J.D. McKissic at this point. And I think the Bills have had an off-season plan on how they wanted to use a receiving back. And so Nyheim Hines, he's not going to stumble into 15 touches a week, but I think he's going to have a very specific role in that backfield because teams have to play the Bills and worry about the pass, the downfield pass, Gabe Davis deep, Stephon Diggs, wherever he wants to go. And they have just been looking for somebody to take those chunks of yardage underneath. So I think Nyheim Hines is, look, he's not going to be an RB2 probably. He's probably going to be a flex play. This hurts Devin Singletary because they've used Devin Singletary up to 84% of the snaps, and they've used him as a runner and a receiver. Singletary maintains the running back role. But the receiving back role, if you're bringing in Nyheim Hines, you want to get better there quickly. And and I love Singletary, okay? So no slight on him, but they upgraded the receiving back. So that's going to take a ding in Singletary's value. Singletary is a strong running back too, regardless, because he was bordering on top 15 running back. So now he's maybe top 20-ish. He's still fine, and he'll still have good weeks. But Nyheim Hines, I'm thinking of flex, PPR leagues. He will have some spike weeks along the way. And spike weeks, I'm not talking 30 points. I'm talking 15 points, a couple of weeks, catch a touchdown pass, catch 5 passes. Those will happen. But it's an overall drain on the rest of the attack. And then Jeff Wilson to the Dolphins. So I earlier talked about Chase Edmonds, who left the Dolphins to go to the Broncos, and Jeff Wilson comes into Miami. Well, here's the point. So if I'm right, if Mike McDaniel was wanting to sit Mostert some of the rest of him, because he knows from his days in San Francisco, Mostert probably can't hold up it. But he didn't have another option because Edmonds didn't fit the system. Well, Jeff Wilson, no doubt he fits the system, running the same system right now. There's no practice time. He walks right into Miami and he runs what he's running in San Francisco. Wilson's having a career year at 5.1 yards per carry. He has 4 runs of 20 or more yards, which equal the number he had in his prior 3 seasons, which was over 200 carries total. And so he's already shown more explosiveness than he's had this year. He even had a 40-plus yard run this year. He never had one of those in his career before. Now, the offensive line in San Francisco, look, they have Trent Williams, but it's not been a great line. Miami's not a great line, but we see Mostert getting things done. My guess is they are going to try to protect Mostert. They don't want to give him 18 carries a week. There's no way. So Mostert probably goes down to 12 carries, and they were trying to get Edmonds in anyway. So I think Jeff Wilson walks in close to a timeshare, 8 to 10 carries a week, flex value there. And hey, I hope Raheem Mostert stays healthy. I want everybody to stay healthy. But his history has shown he hasn't stayed healthy for long periods of time. And they're still using him on kick returns. So if he goes down, Jeff Wilson steps into a situation that's excellent because the speed at Miami's receivers. We have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle putting massive stress on opposing defenses. That is going to allow opportunities for space to run. So Jeff Wilson right now, you'll see he's probably a flex. But again, if Mostert misses time, you might have a top 18 running back on your hands. So if people dropped him in your league when Christian McCaffrey got going, it may be worth an add if you're, again, in a competitive league where there's not much on the waiver wire. TJ Hockenson goes to the Vikings. I think it's status quo. I don't think his fantasy value changes. He was in Detroit, and they, except for the game when they had injuries and he went up for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. Otherwise, he getting between 4 and 7 targets, 40-ish yards, 20-ish yards. It just hasn't been much. And Irv Smith was seeing about 4 targets a game. I mean, they're not going to take targets away from Justin Jefferson, and they're not going to take carries away from Dalvin Cook. And I don't even know if they're taking targets away from Adam Thielen, who, agree or not, 7 and 9 targets a game. He hasn't been great with them as the season's gone on. He had some yardage earlier in the season, but he looks like a player that's, again, on the back 9 a bit. But I think that TJ Hockenson is still, a top 10-ish tight end. He's going to have a lot lower weeks. Then he's not going to have the spike weeks of a lot of 30, 40-yard games. He'll mix in a couple games where he scores, but I don't think that he's going to be a dynamic part of the passing attack there. It's pretty narrow tree, and it probably stays that way. And then the next one, Chase Claypool to the Bears. So the Bears, they hadn't thrown much most of the year. The last couple of games, they've thrown a bit more. They've thrown more judiciously. They've made Justin Fields a bit more weaponized. They're getting him on the move. They're giving him defined reads. They were getting some success on occasional targets to the likes of Dante Pettis, Equinemius St. Brown, and Keel Harry. Well, Chase Claypool is a significant upgrade, in my opinion, over these players. Yes, he hasn't had a sustained track record of success, but he's more explosive than those players. He can do many. He's big physical at the catch point. They were using him in the slot this year. I think he goes to an outside receiver here. I think the big arm of Justin Fields, especially when he's on the move, is going to open things up because defenses have to creep in when they see him move. And I think that's going to give Claypool a lot of one-on-one opportunities downfield. And I think that opens up some field for Darnell Mooney as well. Now, the Bears aren't going to be this high volume passing attack that's going to be throwing 40 times a game. We understand that. So I think when we're looking at Claypool, we're looking, his recent Steelers production hasn't been terrible. It's been, wide receiver 45-ish, wide receiver 40. I think we're looking at more of the same. And I still think Mooney's going to get the majority of the targets. So I don't know that Claypool's fantasy value goes up a lot, but I think that helps Justin Fields. Justin Fields has been running for like 80-plus yards in 2 of the last 3 games. He has a 60 in there, running for touchdowns. He's throwing a touchdown at least in 3 straight games. And I just think Claypool gives him another weapon that defense need to account for. Look, defenses weren't worried about Equinemius St. Brown, N'Keal Harry, Dante Pettis. They weren't worried about them. Claypool is somebody you have to pay attention to. So I think this overall helps them. Again, understand what it is, right? But it does help Darnell Mooney. It's going to open some space for him. And I think that's going to be great because teams will have to put a priority on Claypool just because of his ability downfield and his size. And then Zach Moss goes to the Colts. I almost would say next, please. Look, Zach Moss, I hope things turn around for him. He was given every opportunity in Buffalo to do well, facing mostly light boxes. Yes, the offensive line was not very good there, but unfortunately in Indianapolis, the line isn't very good, and Jonathan Taylor hasn't been getting it done there. So I think Zach Moss is really just going to be involved should Taylor miss time. And then I don't even know what kind of upside we're looking at. Now, with no Nyheim Hines there, now Deion Jackson looked good in the game he played. I get that. Moss would probably get the first crack at the lead if Taylor misses time. But I don't know that I'd run out and roster him right now. Again, deeper league. Because Moss has been deactivated the last couple games for the Bills, so he probably is on many waiver wires. Again, know the depth and size of your league. If it's somebody who, you can stash in case Taylor goes down, fine. But otherwise, I don't see much fantasy value there. He's not going to be stealing carries from Jonathan Taylor. All right, so what we were here for, the must-start fantasy football players. And again, that's the title of the show. I try to give you players who, some of them are already starting, but, we'll frame this as players that have a positive recent trend going for them. Quarterback, Justin Fields, I mentioned him a moment ago. Again, I said 88, 80, and 60 rushing yards, scored touchdowns rushing 2 of the last 3 games. He's thrown at least a touchdown pass in his last 3 games. The coaching staff has opened the offense up. I was on a show with Pat, I can't say his name. I'm sorry. Fitzmaurice. I can't say his name. I'm sorry about this. Anyway, so I was on a show with Pat, and we were talking about Justin Fields, and I said, I wasn't really blown away by the New England game when he did well because the Bears blindsided them, and they didn't see that coming. But when he did it against the Cowboys, I'm like, oh, I take notice because Justin Fields was playing very well against a top-rate defense. And so I think Justin Fields is on his way to being a very strong fantasy performer. And I'm going to struggle to keep him outside of my top 12 quarterbacks because if you're running for 60, 80, and 88 yards and touchdowns, you are in the equation right now. So good there. We'll try to get some questions and get the end of this. And I do see some Instagram questions too. So I will try to scroll back to those when I get there. And if I miss them later at the end, you can let me know. Now, so the other quarterback. So, I still think, look, DeAndre Hopkins had 2 great games. Okay. No question. First game, Saints didn't have any corners. Last week, I don't know what to well, we did say before the game, Mario Puig and myself on the Sirius show, that Minnesota didn't have any corners to hang with Hopkins. A lot of teams may not. This week, we'll see what happens. All right. So as we look this week, I do think that Hopkins has a matchup against the Seahawks. Tariq Woolen's on him, the rookie. I'd like to see that matchup. Physical corner. They're getting good cornerback play. Mike Jackson, they're getting good cornerback play across the board. This will be the week to see what we have in Hopkins. I still think, even though he has 27 targets, 2 games, and that is not about DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm here now. So I still think he's a sell high because he's still mostly a catch and fall guy at this point of his career. Anyway, that's what I think. Keep him if you want the production going, but I still think last year was the reality, and this year, great start, great situation. But I'll point out Kyler Murray. at least while Hopkins is going, we know that offense runs way better when he's in the lineup. And Kyler Murray, 332 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. Now he had some back-breaking interceptions. I get it. But he had only had 1 TD average and 213-yard average over his previous 2 games. And he had been poor most of the season. So it was a breakout game, at least for Murray from a fantasy football perspective. So right now, maybe you get Kyler Murray back in your good graces temporarily. Tight ends. I think Dalton Schultz is back. We know Dak Prescott likes him. And, I still think other than CeeDee Lamb, who they're not using that much, I still think that there is not enough receiver talent. And so but I think there are people that have to get covered. Like Michael Gallup has to have attention paid to him. So I think Dalton Schultz may not be in as great of a spot as he was last year, but he's still going to be open in the middle of the field quite a bit. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. So I do think Dalton Schultz, he's averaged 5.5 catches, 62 yards in the 2 games since Dak returned. I think he's right back in that tight end 6 to 7 range, maybe even tight end 5 range, because really outside the top 4, it's pretty hard to find a steady tight end. So I think Dalton Schultz is right back at it. So in next one, Greg Dulcich. So look, I'll point this out. I know he's had some big plays. J.C. Jackson busted a coverage. He were in zone, didn't pass him off. Dulcich had a long touchdown on the Monday Night Football game against the Chargers. And then we saw in the Sunday game another somewhat broken coverage leading to another big play. I get it. But Dulcich is getting targets, and we have to at least say averaging 6 targets a game, the first 3 games of his career. So I know the busted plays were there, but I think in the land of tight ends where it's very difficult to find regular players and starters, right now he's on that borderline of considering him for a top 12 tight end. And if they're on the bye this week, but if he continues it after the first game back, I think we almost say he's in that top 8 range. But I'm not ready to go there yet. Again, the targets are there. That's really what we're looking at in our tight ends. That's one thing, that you get targets, you have opportunity. Receivers are next. DJ Moore, double-digit targets in the last 2, 7 for 69 and a touchdown, 6 for 152 and a touchdown. PJ Walker, all of a sudden, looks like he might be okay. I know they played 2 teams with depleted secondaries. They played the Bucs, who were down 2 of their top 3 corners. They played the Falcons, who were down their top 2 corners for sure. And I know their third one was dinged up, but I don't know if he was on or off the field, but that was a slot guy anyway. So it's worked out well for DJ Moore. Now, if you think those big games were because of the opponents they played, now you might be talking about a sell high moment on DJ Moore. But if you're believing the PJ Walker recency, then you may say, okay, we're going to lean into DJ Moore to being what we drafted him to be. But I do want to make a note that those 2 defensive secondaries were very, very banged up. But again, he's making plays, and he is an elite talent player. So if it's going to work the way he's been getting targets, so maybe I'd be more inclined to bet on him than to trade him. But if somebody offered me something strong after those 2 big games, I would look at it. Darnell Mooney's the next one. Talked about him with the addition of Chase Claypool. Mooney's been getting it done the last 3 games. Look, he's not, he obviously isn't a wide receiver 1 in fantasy. We know we didn't draft him to be. We drafted him like around 25 or 30. We were drafting him as a wide receiver 3. So when you tell me he has a 7 for 68, a 3 for 53, and a 5 for 70, yeah, that's about what you signed up for, right? You signed up 13, 8, and 15 fantasy points, and that's without touchdowns. He's getting targeted there, but and he's averaging 8 targets in those 3 games. You got to sign up for that. So Darnell Mooney right now, the first 4 games of the season are done. They're long gone. Forget them. Their history. Right now, what you have, right now Darnell Mooney's working as a wide receiver 3. Keep rolling with him. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 70 or more yards in 4 of the last 5 games. In the game he didn't hit it, he had a 50. How do you sit him at this point in a 12-team league if you're starting 3 receivers in a flex? It's very hard to sit him at this point. He is putting up consistent production. And will he have a bad week? Of course. Even the top guys are having bad weeks, right? So right now we're going to look at this and we're going to say Donovan Peoples-Jones. They're going to get the other quarterback back. I'm not going to say his name. I don't like the guy because of what he did. Terrible things he did. Anyway, he's a great quarterback, right? Well, they're going to throw more too. They have Nick Chubb, but they're going to be a diverse offense. Donovan Peoples-Jones will be a part of that. And that offense is going to be potentially potent down the stretch. Now, is it possible the quarterback, when he comes back from that 12-game suspension, is it possible that he's rusty? Yes. But I'm still thinking Donovan Peoples-Jones, the guy you're getting in your lineup in 12-team leagues that start 3 receivers in a flex every week. And then the running backs next. And I'm going to stop this. I did the trade talk earlier. A little longer than we like to go on these shows, right? All right, D'Onta Foreman. So we liked him last year. Last year with the Titans, ran for 4.3 yards per carry. He took over for Derrick Henry when Henry got hurt. He looked good. He was powerful, obviously. He had enough speed. He had enough wiggle to make an occasional defender miss. He was a good, powerful back, and he showed some receiving ability. So he gets 17 touches, 145 yards in week 7. This past week, 26 touches, 118 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It was without Chuba Hubbard. But D'Onta Foreman is a good running back. And the offensive line blocking, it's not been bad. They're in the top half of the league per PFF. So this is a team, they could get things going on the ground. Foreman's going to be, it's going to be really hard for him to put him outside of my top 20 running backs when I'm doing my weekly rankings, especially while there's some bye weeks going on. And then we'll see what Chuba Hubbard does. But I still think D'Onta Foreman should be well ahead of him. And then Ramondre Stevenson, I figured this past week 8 was when Damian Harris was probably healthy, right? Well, if he was, Ramondre Stevenson, 63% snap share, 16 carries, 7 receptions. He has 21 targets over his last 3 games. He's caught 19 of those for 146 yards. Ramondre Stevenson right now, Damian Harris or not, he's a top 17 back, 18 back, 15, right in that range. You're starting him. Right now, I don't know how you could sit him. He has dual threat ability, and he's just shown he's an excellent, excellent football player. And then the last one, first of all, forget about Caleb Huntley. And then why I'm going to tell you forget about Caleb Huntley is I imagine Cordero Patterson has to be close coming back. But Tyler Algier will keep a roll. Tyler Algier had a role while Patterson was playing because you can't overwork Cordero Patterson. Algier, 15 to 17 touches in the last 3 games. His yards between 50 and 85. He scored in 2 of those games. I think he'll lose a little bit of workload. That 15 to 17 touches will go closer to 10, but he'll have flex option for your lineup in 12-team leagues when Patterson gets back. And again, I don't know when, but it's got to be soon. Patterson's been out 5 or 6 weeks already, so he's got to come back soon. But don't make the sucker play of Caleb Huntley because, like I said, if it's for a 1-week thing, that's one thing. Because, he's getting some, he's 16 and 6 carries. I think it was over to 3 weeks. But once Patterson's back, that's a vapor. That's gone. So be careful with that. All right, let's see what questions we have. I know I had an Instagram question. Kabroom asked, does the Claypool trade help Pickens? The answer is no. Claypool was running all the slot. Pickens was on the outside. So basically, they're going to plug someone else into the slot. But defenses, they were never game planning for Chase Claypool. They were never saying, our game plan is to take out Chase Claypool. They were just playing with a regular slot, coverage, slot corner, whether it be help from a safety, but that wouldn't be anything special. It was the play design and where he was set up. So I don't think this helped. Pickens was already a full-time player. And, even when they did put Claypool occasionally in the outside, it wasn't at the expense of Pickens. Matter of fact, it's one less player for the defenses to worry about because there will be a downgraded third receiver for them. But I think Pickens stays status quo here in this deal right now. Good question. It's a great question. I mean, one more. Deontay Johnson or not? Deontay Johnson has not been good the last few weeks. And again, his role isn't changing. The Claypool situation does nothing for him. And on top of my head, I want to say he's caught it's like close. It's not 50%, but it's real close, like 50% of his targets. And I want to say, top of my head, he hasn't hit 50 yards in 3 games. So that's been a little bit problematic. All right, I got Randy here. Randy, you want to know? Kabroom, you're welcome. You're going to ask if Deion Jackson is a must-have. So you know what? It's neither. They did pick up Moss, and I know Jackson had the big game. Right now, it's got to be a timeshare, right? And, Taylor had the setback, but he came back in the game on his ankle. So my guess is they're going to play him. So I don't know that either one's a must-have. And like I said, Deion Jackson had a nice game. Do we see that again? Maybe, maybe not. Moss is, Moss didn't do anything in Buffalo, so that gets me nervous. But the fact they traded for him, but they may be more because he can catch the ball. So I don't know. I don't think, what? Let's put it this way. Deion Jackson's role probably doesn't change. It probably stays the same as it was with Hines. Because if Moss is coming as a pass catcher, it's not like Hines was getting a lot of work in that role anyway. And I know Jackson got targets in the game that that he took over when both of them were out. But I'm not bullish on this Colts running game because the offensive line is terrible. And now with Ellinger in there, I think defense are going to press more. Matt Ryan may have been old and washed, but defenses had to respect the downfield passing. I mean, I know Ellinger threw a downfield pass or two, but teams aren't going to worry about that. So I really think the offense right now is a bit of a downgrade, but I don't know, one or the other. At least Deion Jackson did something this year, right? Moss hasn't done anything in a while. So maybe Deion Jackson over to 2 would be right. I got one more question here on Instagram. What do you think, Jonathan Taylor, the rest of the season? One out on waivers for Jamie. All right, let's see what you got here. So Jonathan, look, I think his ankle's not right. The offensive line is not right at all. And I'm hopeful that if Sam Ellinger brings in more of a running aspect, it opens up some lines. But Taylor went off the field and had his ankle wrapped last week. And if it was a high ankle sprain and he came back quickly from it, he may not be right the rest of the season. We've seen it a lot of times. The high ankle sprain, if not fully healed, it could be like a season crippler. And right now, that's kind of what Taylor's looking like. Now, I blame the line too. But and then it's the James Robinson. So ultimately, he's a great football player, and the Jaguars coaching staff loved him to a point. But the reason they couldn't use Robinson anymore is because they needed explosive ability in the running game. They had no explosiveness at all on the team. Evan Ingram was the most explosive guy they had, and that was their tight end. And so basically they had to go to ETN to give them some explosiveness. Well, James Robinson still doesn't have explosiveness with the Jets, and the Jets are in the same situation with Zach Wilson. Michael Carter has some explosiveness, so my guess is that Michael Carter still has the lead there. Robinson gets some work, but ultimately the Jets lost Elijah Vera Tucker on the line, and that line may not be as good as it was earlier in the season. That line could be a trending downward where Carter's a pass catcher, and I don't think they want Robinson in that role there because they need explosiveness, and that's not what Robinson is. Robinson's reliable. All right, Randy. Rams backfield. Yes, Kyren Williams, please. They might activate him this week. I need him. I need Kyren Williams. I have him. I have leagues where I had Elijah Mitchell, I had Cam Akers, I had Chase Edmonds, who I'm not hopeful for. But man, I've been chasing running backs, just some of these bigger industry leagues, and I do think Kyren Williams, that's a guy they're high on, and he really has no competition. We saw it last week. They were giving anybody but Darrell Henderson touches. It was insane. They're giving these guys that probably Ronnie Rivers, 8 carries. Malcolm Brown, as we said 2 weeks ago, what happened, or 3 weeks ago, and Malcolm Brown sees more carries than Henderson. Clearly, McVay doesn't like Henderson, that's for sure. So, but Kyren Williams may be activated. If he is on your waiver wire, make a push for him because Sean McVay needs something. And look, if nothing else, Kyren Williams may be a pass-catching guy, and out of the backfield, we'll take that in fantasy. He may not be big enough to run between the tackles. I don't know. They want to do that anyway. So that's the hope in that backfield right now. He's the only hope because it ain't coming from Henderson. It ain't coming from Ronnie Rivers, and it sure ain't coming from Malcolm Brown. And Cam Akers, I can't see that working back out. All right, next one. Should you trade Diggs for Pittman and Swift? No. Apparently, Swift still isn't healthy, and he was out 4 or 5 weeks. And he's an injury waiting to happen, unfortunately, been since college. And last year when he came back from the injury, they limited his snaps. And Pittman has the new quarterback. And you saw he had the targets, but the yardage wasn't there. So you know what? No, you got to keep Stephon Diggs there, I think. I think you have to do that. DJ Duvernay. Oh, guys, good. Randy had that question as well. Maybe you asked that on both platforms. I don't know. But, yeah, so I'm going to say, like I said probably Deion Jackson's done something. He had a good game. Zach Moss hasn't done anything in a couple of years. So I would probably lean Jackson there. And then Kevin, Taylor, Chubb, Swift, Sanders, Walker, pick 2. Nick Chubb's having the best season of his life. He's having a special season. I have him top 4 running back. I'd like to put him higher. He just doesn't catch passes. That's a problem. And then number 2's got to be Ken Walker. I know last week was disappointing, but he still got in the end zone. And he's a good running back, and that offensive line is better than I expected. And Pete Carroll's doing some really good things. And their receivers right now are okay. They're getting past those injuries where they got dinged up. So yeah, those are the 2 that I go with rest of schedule. All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging with me. Everybody have a great day, and we will talk soon.